Welcome to Step Into the Pivot. We're your hosts. I'm Teresa Conti.
And I'm Ivana Polonio. We talk with people just like you. We have honest conversations about current issues that women and men face and how we pivot to address them in our lives.
This podcast is your companion as you step into a workout or take some time for yourself.
Welcome to Step Into the Pivot. I'm your host, Ivana Polonio.
And I'm Teresa Conti. And today we have an amazing guest, Emily Rassam. And Emily is a financial planner for Archer Investment. She really has a passion for helping clients make sense of their financial lives and develop clear plans and, all those kind of things. She's also a mom with two small children. So I think that really comes into play for her as to where she is today and how she kind of got where she was.
And as on this podcast, we talk about major life changes and we just drop into that conversation because you can learn more about Emily Rassam on her LinkedIn posts, which we'll talk about a little bit. You can read her bio, access more information about her on our site. But here, let's just go for it, Emily. If you're up for it, tell us about a really major pivot that happened for you. And, Teresa and I were both very, blessed and honored to be in the vicinity of that as we were collaborating, working on some projects together. We, saw you navigate these changes. You've had kids, you have kids. And there was a related move away from a large firm that you worked for and then joining a smaller RIA to, well, I'll let you use the verb. Was it to accommodate work-life balance, harmony? Was it to just switch things up? Tell us about that transition and then talk a little bit about what was, surprising and maybe unexpected led
Yeah,
you to go for it.
absolutely. I think that in our careers, we feel that we just need to keep growing and climbing, and our next role needs to be bigger and better with a bigger title and a bigger salary and more clients. And there's two different times in my career that I've taken a big step back or sidestep that ended up being just so rewarding for me in a bunch of different ways. And I'll kind of briefly share the first one, and then I know we want to dig into kind of the big one. When I was living in upstate New York, I was growing my career in the retirement plan space, and I had moved into an external wholesaling role. And I wanted to move to Charlotte, North Carolina. And I knew that moving to a new city and just being on the road and traveling and being away from my husband was not going to make sense. And so I made a career change to come internally into a firm when I moved to Charlotte. And it was a really big step back for me in income and, job title and everything. But I knew that I wanted to go back to working with individuals and working with families and helping them with financial planning. And so I made a big change there and started growing a financial planning practice at a large firm. And I grew and grew and grew and grew and grew. And then I had a family. And so in my, you know, kind of postpartum, trying to figure out getting back into work and navigating my career, my very busy career, I had a mental breakdown when my son was about 4 months old. And I realized that I couldn't keep growing at this big firm with more and more clients, with more and more responsibilities, with more managerial duties. And I realized that I needed to make a big change to spend more time with my family and create more work-life harmony.
And I love that you call it work-life harmony, right? So let's talk about because work-life balance. I don't know that I always agree with that, right? But it's more like a harmony, them working together. So how did you actually make that decision to leave and start fresh at the new firm?
Yeah. Well, and I want to talk about the work-life harmony thing
Sure,
too, because
sure.
balance to me, I think about when you're balancing on a tightrope, that still seems really stressful. So even when you're in balance, you're still wobbly. And balance also makes me think that you need to have equal parts of both work and life. And that if you don't have them equal, then you're not going to be balanced. And so for me, harmony just feels better because it's very rare that my time is equally split between work and my family. My goal is just that I feel good about both areas. And sometimes that means strategically leaning more into work and putting more energy and effort and attention into it. And sometimes that means, spending a lot of time with my kids and with my husband and around my house. And so I don't ever feel that it's truly, totally balanced. But for me, if I feel really good about where I am with both and that feels like it's in harmony, that just feels better. So that's the term that I use. I'm not on a tightrope. I'm just trying to kind of build both of these things into my life happily.
And Emily, I think that's an amazing message for all of our listeners out there because I totally agree with you. I don't really love the term work life balance because I love your tightrope definition, right? I think that totally makes sense. So that to me really speaks to me.
I
Mhm.
completely agree. And what you're pointing to is integration. So harmonizing it, integrating all parts of you, all parts of your life, all parts of your family, you and as a professional. And we do see that in how you express yourself out there on social media as you interact with the industry. And it's really beautiful. It resonates because there's this nice well, again, integration of you as a human and as a professional, that financial person that one can then trust, because when I think about what you're offering out there, I feel that you can relate from all perspectives. So I could see how this approach could be really good for business too.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, and I promise I'll get back to my pivot, but that's really kind of where I also find where I specialize in financial planning is, people feel that they need to just save, 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 save for the future. And, part of my whole message is bringing in harmony between saving enough for the long-term goals and then having enough to kind of spend and have and enjoy your time today. And so I think that sometimes when it comes to our career or it comes to our money, we feel that we should, save or we should grow our career in a certain way. And, when I decided to make my big career pivot, what I decided is I needed to come up with exactly what I wanted and needed in my life at that exact moment. What do I enjoy doing? What do I want to do? What do I need to be paid to do that work? What type of environment do I want to be in? This is an exercise I also, urge my clients to go through as well. For people who are further in their career, you really can write your own ticket and determine, what's going to make me happiest. And it doesn't mean I need to go hunt for a specific job role. It means I need to create, and potentially pitch myself as having this skill set and this interest level and this value that I can bring to an organization. And so I think that, we have the ability to sort of create, the role that we want to potentially have. And so I did that exploration for myself and I said, what lights me up? What do I truly enjoy doing? What do I do best? And when am I my best self and when am I my favorite self? So, if I can show up to work as much as possible, doing the work that I truly love and enjoy, that's going to bring a lot more harmony to my life too, because I'm not having the Sunday scaries and showing up on Monday just absolutely dreading life. Um, so I really thought about my job and said, what's going to make sense for me? And I decided to take a step back and find a smaller firm that embraced the idea of life harmony and understood the fact that my kids are only 0 to 4 years old once. And it's such a important time for me to be present for my family. And so I really wanted to step back, step sideways, maybe in some ways, do a job that I love and really enjoy my family and bring that harmony into my life as well. So I wrote kind of what would be the perfect kind of job role and then I looked for that. So that's really the thought process that I went through then.
Well, and for you to have that kind of self-awareness, right? Like to know that, I think is so important. And I love that story because you're a working mom, and I want to talk, I think we want to talk a little more about that, but I will also tell you there's plenty of dads out there. Like I have a bunch of friends who have who are dads who have one young children. And one night I had one of my friends call me, and it was like 7:30 at night, and he's calling me and asked me a work question, and I was like, "Are you still at the office?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "You need to go home. Your kids are only small once." Like, that time with them is absolutely such an important time. And I think it's so awesome that you recognize that and you wanted to have that. So let's talk a little about working moms. And do you see them differently now that you are one yourself? Right? Because it is so important. We're raising these awesome little humans who we want to grow up to be their best selves, right? So talk a little about that if you would.
Yeah. I've said more than once that I need to go on an apology tour. Just thinking through, my 20s and 30s, working alongside other mothers and not really totally understanding everything that they were, you know, handling and balancing between the family dynamics and sick kids and school schedules and all of those different types of things. I don't know that I gave people enough credit until I really was sitting in this seat myself. And just the fact that, being a working mom, you're always, when I'm done working and I work from home, I walk out of my office door and I'm immediately, a full-time mom and until they're in bed and settled. And so there's not that downtime or rest or ability, to have some of the different types of hobbies or self-care activities or things like that that I had before. So I always knew that moms were absolutely superhuman, and now I just understand so much more. So I think that in my 20s and 30s, I probably would have helped out other moms and understood a little bit more and maybe taken some things off of their plate or been maybe a little more understanding along the way had I known really um, how important this role is, but also how much is involved, how much work is involved. It's a really hard job to do both.
I appreciate you saying that, and I'm listening to you and feeling a couple different things simultaneously. One is I think I was a mom during that time that you were you were saying you were not yet. So I am receiving. I do not need your apology. I have experienced you before being a mom, and you were already a very kind, compassionate, empathetic, and just overall, mindful and inclusive person. So what you're talking about is an internal state and how you were, behaving in the workspace. You were very understanding, and it's really sweet to hear that. What is really what's this is reminding me of is that, even if we're not parents, everyone's going through something. And so just giving the other person the benefit of the doubt that there might be something really big that they're juggling, that at certain points in our lives could lead us to that, you called it, mental, emotional breakdown. And it's, you know, that is just the reality. There's only so much we know about each other as we see each other on Zoom meetings or in conference rooms when we travel or even when we're at happy hour. And, assume the best and assume that there is, probably a lot going on for the person that you're interacting with. I also want to say that as you're describing your changes and that inventory of, what was lighting you up, lifting you up, and what was, not working in your life. I love the emphasis on what do I really want? I feel like it's so easy often to focus on what drains us. And before you know it, we're in the complaining territory. But this is the hard question. What do I really like doing? And I love that you distinguished between the best self and the favorite self. I thought that was really cool. And then that decision, to leave and start fresh. It sounds to me like that breakdown ultimately was a breakthrough. Would you agree with that? And if so, can you maybe tell us a little bit about that big pivot in your life, for future potential pivots and life changes and potentially challenges that will ask to be transformed? What have you learned and how could you apply it? again?
Yeah. So I think that at first it felt like when I was going to leave the firm that I was at, it felt like I was giving up. So it felt that I'm giving up, in my career, you're only as successful as your client base, right? And so when you leave a firm, you don't get to necessarily take your clients with you. And so you really have to start over. It's a really big deal to move as an advisor. And so to me, it felt like I had built up clients and relationships, and I was working at a firm and had some management responsibilities. And it felt like at the time, it felt like I can't do it and I have to give up. And I'm going to have to give up some income, and I'm going to have to give up clients, and I'm going to have to give up, um, just where I felt that I'd climbed and kind of where I'd grown. And so, I made the decision, and I said, here's what I want to do. And I moved over to a much smaller firm, started fresh, and almost immediately there were a couple of things that were shocking to me. One, I didn't have to take a step back in pay. So what I found out was I was able to kind of retain my income moving into what I had felt was a step back. I had assumed that I would have to be giving up some income, and I didn't. It was a nice surprise. Also, I had built some great relationships, and some clients followed me. And so they found me and followed me and joined me in the new firm. And I'm so grateful for that. And I was able to then build at the new firm financial planning processes that made sense to me, that I had always wanted to do. When you work with a much more limited number of clients, you can build much deeper financial plans and have deeper relationships and go farther with them. And so I ended up with all of these positives of, some things that felt like I was giving up. I actually ended up giving up some stress and overwork and expectations and goals. And I ended up moving to a firm that prioritized my mental health, understood right from the get-go. We talked about the special one-on-one time I had with each of my kids every single week, and the balance of schedule that I wanted, and the limit on the clients I wanted to potentially take on. And all of those things aligned. And, within the last 2 years since I've been to the firm, I've become a partner of the firm. And we are in a position where we're turning clients away. We can't take on everybody who wants to join us. And so, all of these things were not the goal necessarily. This wasn't a career change that was meant to, grow my LinkedIn status or my client base or my income. It was meant to be, I wanted to make the right decision for my family and for me. And I wanted to love my job and feel good about it. And it's just kind of interesting that once I lined all of those things up and took this big leap, it all really worked out so well.
I love so many things that you just said, because I think it's totally true that especially as women, I think a lot of times we think we're gonna, take this step back or have to give something up, and even though I think you thought that that was what was going to happen, it's nice to hear that, right, that you didn't, and that's to me an amazing piece of the story that I think a lot of people could take from that, right? That it is scary. What am I going to have to give up? Even though I'm prepared for that, and you really didn't have to. So I think that's such an amazing piece of your story. So we only have a couple of minutes left. So, and I know you talked about this a little bit already, but is there anything else you'd like to say about how your pivot was a step forward for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, in my previous job, I think one thing that changed a lot for me personally was really being very choosy about what I said yes to. So, one thing about a fresh start or a pivot is when you're kind of shedding all of these different roles and responsibilities and things that you need to do, and you're stepping into a new role and position, you get to kind of decide what gets added back and what's important. And one thing that I learned a lot coming into the new firm is how to say no, and how to protect my calendar and how to protect my time. And so that's something that I've really carried with me, being a mom now of a 2.5-year-old and a 9-month old. I can't work till 8 o'clock at night, and I can't say yes to everyone, and I can't be everything to everyone. And so that's something that, um, I've been coached my whole career on, but never really did until I had to. So one thing that I wish that I had done is maybe started earlier with saying no to things that didn't make sense to me or didn't align with where I was going, and didn't support kind of my highest and greatest use of my time. And I didn't really do that until I had to. So that would be kind of a piece of advice that I would go back and tell myself earlier in life, is that such good things come. When I open up my calendar, I have time now to spend writing on LinkedIn and contributing back to the community. I have more time to do pro bono work. I have time to join great podcasts like this. And I have time to spend with my kids, and I have time to grow certain types of relationships and mentoring that I've wanted to do. So I think that by really being more protective over my calendar, um, I've I've been able to fill that time with things that truly bring me balance and joy and that harmony that I've been seeking.
So wonderful. You're talking about discerning that then allows you to pivot from a no into a yes. Because those no's really then allow you to say yes to things that are really fulfilling and ultimately in the highest good of, people around you, your organization, your family. What a beautiful tip. I'll definitely pay closer attention to. What do I need to say no to in order to move certain things forward? Thank you for that.
Yeah. So thank you, Emily, for being on today. We really do appreciate it. I think you have some great advice for our listeners. I am sure we'll have you back because there were a lot of other things I would have loved to have talked to you about today, but we are out of time.
Thank you for having me.
That's just such a joy having you here, Emily. And yes, like Teresa said, can't wait to talk again. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Step Into the Pivot. We'll see you next week. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Step Into the Pivot. We hope you found inspiration and valuable insights from our conversation. Remember, life is a series of pivots, and it's in those moments of change that we truly grow.
If you enjoyed today's episode and want to stay connected, make sure to check out our websites. You'll find additional resources, behind-the-scenes content, and more details about our incredible guests. We love hearing from listeners, so reach out with your thoughts, questions, or your own pivot stories.
To keep the conversation going, be sure to follow us on social media. We're on LinkedIn and Instagram, where we share updates, quotes, and engage with our amazing community.
If you haven't already, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your feedback makes a difference, and it helps us bring you meaningful conversations. We're signing off, reminding you that every pivot is a step forward. Take care, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Step Into the Pivot.